and I kept like hallucinating a little bit. The wind was blowing and I'd think I'd hear dogs or think I'd hear a snow machine coming or something, and there wasn't ever anything.
Welcome to 10 Minute Travels. With me as always is Phil Freeman.
And with me as always is Shane Patrick. And today we're going to be talking to Emily Maxwell, Iditarod musher.
Let's get right to it, shall we?
I'm like, all right, guys, all right, let's go. And so mine start going, and I look back, and hers don't move an inch, and mine got to the bottom of the hill, and then they stopped again, and so now it's like, this is really real. This is what I was talking about earlier with, if a dog doesn't want to go, you cannot force it to go. It's not going to. And it was obvious they were done. And so, off and on for 2 more miles, I would hold the gang line and walk with them, and then, take a break, go back to the sled and see if I could get them to go. And here and there they would, but at a certain point they stopped, and they didn't even want to move forward with me when I walked with them. And I remember I just had that moment of like, this, they're not going to go. There's nothing I can do. And there's a tracker on the sled, so that, people watching online can see where you're at, and the race can see where you're at. And it has an SOS button that's like, I'm in trouble, for whatever reason, I need help. And you have to really want to push that thing, because it's in a dog booty. It's pinned to the front of your sled. So you have to unpin it, take it out of the booty. You have to like turn a few knobs and open things up, and then the SOS button's like deep inside.
And they're all set up the same way.
Correct. Okay. Yeah. And so, I remember just it was like maybe a split second. I was like, man, I can't believe this is happening. And even though, it was like, it wasn't that far out of the realm of reality that could happen with a team that I'd only been running a couple weeks, but just, I like watched my finger from like above push that button, and, I never regretted it. Even now I don't. It was a bummer that I had to make that decision, of course, and that had to happen. But, it was the right thing to do. It was the only thing that I could do. And so anyways, but, by that time, I think we were like 5 miles from the checkpoint. I didn't know that for sure at the time, but later I was sure. And I had to go and scout out, I remember, like snow to make water. We have kind of like a double boiler system that we use to make water out on the trail. So you can use, if you can get river water, use that, or snow, whatever. And we have heat and put it in the bottom and heat the snow up and melt it for water. So I had to like look all over to get snow and made them water. And then the last meat that I had for them, I gave them water and meat, and they ate and drank. And then, they were all hunkered down in between the tussocks. And I, by that time, it was like I was running out of all my provisions for me and for them, because I hadn't, you don't plan to get stuck on the trail like that. And I even had a little extra than what I would have needed if the run had gone fine. So by that time, I'm dehydrated and I'm super tired, and I'm just done, and so I remember I like had the tracker in my hand, and I was also super sweaty, and now it's starting to get dark and it's starting to get cold. And luckily I had a backup pair of long johns, which I had almost like thrown. I was cleaning up my sled at the previous checkpoint. I almost thought, I don't need them, and was going to throw them out. Luckily I had kept them, because now I'm sweaty and getting cold. And so I basically stripped down completely naked on the trail, threw all my sweaty stuff, in a bag, and then put a fresh pair of long johns on. And I took all my stuff out of my sled and just put it on the side, put my sleeping bag in there, and I crawled on the sled and like laid down, because I was just out of it. And it's like, well, they're not going to go anywhere. Hopefully somebody's going to come out and check on us. I need to put my head down for a minute. And so I remember I was like lying down, holding that tracker and just watching it blink, and I'm thinking, I hope they can see that. You don't have any signs.
You mean the SOS indicators blinking?
It was blinking. Yeah, it was like a green light. And then I remember later it turned red, and it stopped blinking. And I was like, I don't know what that means. Like, are they somebody coming? And so then, I maybe fell asleep for like maybe 45 minutes at most. And then I woke up and I heard dogs, and I could hear somebody's voice in the darkness, and got closer and closer. And I realized it was my friend, the one that lives in Talkeetna. Her name's Anya, and she was coming through the darkness, and I see her headlamp, and I turn mine on, and she comes up, and stops beside me, and she's like, "Oh, what's happening?" It was like, I can't get him to go, and I mean, I was starting to cry and everything, and I'm like, I pushed the button and nobody's come yet, and I don't know what to do, and she did, and of course she didn't want to stop too long, and I understood, because same scenario as what I had before with that other musher.
Yeah, contagion.
Right. And so I was like, just, no, it's fine, just go, and she said, see if your team will follow me. I was like, all right. I'm like, if they don't, when you get to that checkpoint, tell them I need help. Like, I can't get them there, And so, she calls the dogs up, and I'm like, all right, guys, all right, we're going to go. I put all my stuff in the sled real quick, and she takes off, and they don't budge. And, they go back into their little spots and lay right down. I was like, oh my God, And that happened one more time with another musher that went by. And then by that time, it was starting to get a little bit light, and it had been probably 6 or so hours since I had pushed the button. And I mean, we're like not that far. And I'm, at this point, I'm like a little bit upset that nobody's come out to check, because
Right.
They don't know what's happening. Like, I could have a dog that was like really injured or something, And so it starts to get light, and I had them tied off between like a tree and the sled. And I was like, I have to walk. I'm going to start walking, because they're not going to go. Nobody's coming to me. So I'm the only movable piece, And so I take my GPS and the tracker in my hand, because at that point I was so out of it and felt, I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to pass out on the trail or, what's going to happen. I don't know where there is no trail really, because again, it's just open territory. And so I start walking, and, every now and then again, you see a trail marker, and walking and walking and walking. And I mean, I'm like mad, and I'm crying and everything. And, I get to, and I kept like hallucinating a little bit. The wind was blowing, and I'd think I'd hear dogs. I think I'd hear a snow machine coming or something, and there wasn't ever anything. And I get within about a mile of the checkpoint, and then I hear a snow machine, and it's real. And I look, and over crest of this hill comes one snow machine, and then another, and they come towards me, and I realize I know both of them. One is actually this nonstop dog where he's a sales rep and, kind of a documenter of sled dog racing. So he was traveling outside of the race, documenting the Iditarod for the year. And then he was with another dog musher who I know, and he's part of a dog mushing couple. So they were traveling independently of the race. So they show up, and they, ride right up to me and turn their machines off. And, we look at each other, and they're like, hey. I'm like, hey. I pushed that button, like, I don't know how many, I just like start bawling, and I'm like, nobody came, the dogs are back there, and look, like, I was so upset. And, one of them gets out, he hugs me, he's like, we've got dog food. He's like, do you want to go back to the checkpoint or back to the dogs? I'm like, I want to go back to the dogs. I'm like, I just left him. Like, I had to leave him there. It was like this awful feeling. And so they take me back to the dogs. They brought dog food, and so that I, could feed him. And they go back to check on the other woman who'd been a little bit behind me, who had that stop team. And so they're gone for a little bit. I'm feeding the dogs, and they come back, and she's moving now. Her team's moving. I was like, all right, we're going now. Like, we got to go now. And so I, had him out in front of my team on the snow machine. I said, just stay, a little bit ahead of them, and I think they'll chase you, like by now they've had enough rest that they got to have a little gas in their system. And so, he took off and just went slow, and I was like, all right, guys, all right, and just like real upbeat and like, let's go. And they still, I still had to run through those tussocks the rest of the way. If I didn't run, they still stopped, right. Even with somebody out in front of them. And we finally got to the checkpoint, and it's right on this river. So we dropped, off land onto the river, and we're going over to where it's basically an old ghost town. There's like a few cabins there, and there's all the staff and vets and volunteers and stuff over there waiting. And we pulled up, and I mean, that's like normally where you check in and they can count your dogs and make sure everything's cool. And I said, I'm done with this race, and
That was Emily Maxwell. If you want to learn more about Emily or any of the other things we do at 10 Minute Travels, please check out 10minutetravels.com.
And we want to remind you to make sure that your sense of humor matches your sense of adventure.
And please like, subscribe, and share this podcast on all the platforms.